We were able to successfully create a remote GitHub repository and to configure our local repository so that we could push all of our local commits up to the remote. Now, I want us to switch gears for a second, and I want us to do the opposite. And that is, instead of taking a repository that's local and pushing it to the remote, I want to see how we can do the reverse, how we can go with a remote repository and pull it down to have a local copy of it to work with. This is assuming that we don't have a local copy to start with. This kind of circumstance would come up if someone said, hey, come and collaborate on a project with me. I've put my code on GitHub. Now why don't you go get it, pull down a copy, and then we can start collaborating. Or if you wanted to work on an open source project, the same kind of thing. You would go out, find the open source project, get a copy of it to bring onto your local machine, and then you could start contributing. The way we'll simulate this on our single machine is that we will back out of our Explore California directory. So I'm going to do cd ... to go backwards a directory, and in that directory you can see I've got my Explore California. I'm just going to ignore that. Let's pretend it doesn't even exist for a moment. Let's say that I'm a brand new user, I've got Git installed, but I don't have a Git project yet on my machine. What I want to do is go to GitHub and figure out what project I want. Now you can search around and you click the Explore link and you can look for different open source projects, or we can stumble upon this Explore California website and say, all right, I'm going to collaborate on that one. Regardless of how you get to the project, what you need to know is how do you locate it? And GitHub tells you that information right here. This is what you need to know. So you want to copy this so that we can paste it. This is the path to the repository. It's also the same path that got configured in our Explore California folder when we set up the remote branch. It's the way that we refer to this repository. So let's take that over here, and now from the command line, notice I'm not in any kind of Git project at the moment. I'm just in a plain old folder. I'm going to say git clone, and then I'm going to paste in that path. So I'm going to clone that remote repository, which basically is going to say, make me a local copy of it, clone it on my machine. And when it does, it's going to create a new directory. And that directory, by default, will be the name here, Explore California, not the .git. So Explore California is the default. Now, of course, I already have an Explore California folder. So when I try it, it says, sorry, that already exists. But that's no big deal. We can call the folder that exists in anything we want. The name of the directory has nothing to do with the name of the repository. So let's give it a different name. I'm going to say that I'm going to be collaborating with Linda. So I'm going to call this Linda_version. So this is Linda's version of the repository. So you can see when I do that, it counts the objects, it compresses them, and it receives them onto my local machine. Now I do ls-la, and you'll see I've got this new folder, Linda version. Let's go inside that folder and take a look, and there's my whole project. It downloaded the files and folders that were on GitHub to my local repository. Now if we do git branch, you'll see that we don't have all of the branches that we had in our own version, in the Explore California version. Instead, we just have the master branch because that's all that exists on the remote branch. Those other ones that have never been pushed up there, they remain private until we push them up there and make them public. Now, if there had been more than one branch up there, it still would have brought down the master branch by default. You can specify the -b option and tell it which branch you want if you want a different one. But by default, it's going to take whatever GitHub has as its default branch. And by the way, you can also configure which branch is the default in GitHub in the GitHub admin controls. So now we've successfully cloned this project onto our machine. Our machine happens to have 2 repositories on it. And what I'm thinking is that we're going to be able to switch back and forth between those as if we were actually jumping from one computer to another computer. They just happen to exist on the same computer, but it's 2 different Git repos. We're going to call one of them our version, and the other one will be Linda's version. And Linda's going to be a collaborator that we're going to work with on this project. So we'll make commits, we'll push them up to the remote, and then we can switch over to Linda's repo and see how it looks to her. Then she can make changes, push those up to the repo, and we can switch back to our version, and we'll be able to see things from our side and how they would look. So don't let it throw you that it's not actually 2 different people on 2 different computers. It's still 2 different Git repositories, each that contain their own unique sets of information.